Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your presence in this last day of the Global Democracy Coalition Forum. Today is the Global Forum. We witness the culmination of a week-long effort spanning across the globe. It is a testament to the dedication and hard work put in by all involved, and we are immensely proud of what we have achieved together. We are thrilled with the engaging discussions on the impact of youth and technology on democracy, as well as the exploration of the diverse narratives of democracy across the regions. Today, as we embark on our global discussion, we anticipate an incredibly rich report emerging from our collective efforts. I have the honor to introduce you to Lena Requila, who will deliver the opening remarks of the forum. Lena is the director of the Asia and the Pacific region of International IDEA, and she oversees country programs in Myanmar, Nepal, and Bhutan. She joined IDEA in 2002. Between 2004 and 2013, she managed International IDEA's program on supporting constitution building process in Nepal. She created and supported initiatives aiming at forging consensus on political reform and developing the capacity of Nepalese stakeholders on constitutional options. Prior to her time in Nepal, Lena worked at the South Asia program, including Burma, Myanmar, at International IDEA. She's a former Secretary General of Finland's Advisory Board for Relations with Developing Countries at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and a member and former chair of the Network Institute for Global Democracy. Among her work with NIGD, she coordinated projects promoting North-South dialogues on democracy and globalization and was involved in the World Social Forum process. Lena has worked in India, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and Vietnam, and Myanmar, and has published about democracy at the global level, on women's political participation, and on inclusive democratic processes. Lena, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Elisenda, and Excellencies, colleagues, friends. On behalf of International IDEA, a warm welcome, and thank you so much for being present here online and on-site at the third Global Forum at the third Global Forum here in Seoul, South Korea. Global Democracy Coalition, or CDG for brief, has truly come a long way since its inception in 2021. It has grown from a spontaneous and informal group of 25 American and European civil society organizations to over 100 organizations from civil society, academia, international intergovernmental organizations, and from all around the world, from north, south, east, west. And I'm grateful that many of the members of the coalition are present here today. It was formed to discuss opportunities, challenges to democracy, share good practices, and collaborate for more and better democracy. And as this audience would know, the CDG was formed ahead of the first Summit for Democracy, hosted by President Biden, to provide a platform for civil society and international organizations to engage with the Summit for Democracy. It was first convened by International IDEA, which now hosts the Secretariat, with Counterpart International as the co-coordinator, and a steering committee of an additional 5 organizations: Alliance for Democracies, Alliance for Vietnam's Democracy, Accountability Lab, Humanity United, and DT Institute. So this third CDG forum is held as a space for dialogue and exchange, and importantly, to place the issues on the agenda of the third Summit for Democracy that is held next week here in Seoul, hosted by the Korean government. And as Elisenda mentioned, to prepare for this global forum, and throughout this week, from Monday to Thursday, this global forum was preceded by regional forums that were organized in Latin America, in Africa, and Europe and Asia, bringing together stakeholders from these respective regions and to identify opportunities, challenges to democracy in their contexts, and crafting together a positive narrative on democracy from each region, culminating today's global gathering here in Seoul. And the key messages, reports, and recordings from all these regional forums will soon be available from the coalition website. Asia Forum took place yesterday, and many of us were part of that forum, organized by the Alliance for Vietnam Democracy and hosted by the East Asia Institute, the beautiful building downtown. And I truly enjoyed those discussions, which emphasize that while challenges are huge, this region is a site of geopolitical rivalries, increasing tensions. This is also a region of several success stories of democratization, economic development, relative peace and stability, and of civil society actors coming together in solidarity, resisting and protesting repressive government action. And this global forum, of which regional forums were integral part, has given itself three key objectives. Number one is to explore the challenges and opportunities encountered by democracy within each region. And these discussions really focused on the aspects of youth, of technology, and a state of democracy. And several panels investigated how younger generations engage with technology, innovate, and tackle disinformation. And for example, the message from the European Regional Forum was that the civic technology needs to be regulated, and for technology to be successful, it needs to be built around solving political problems. The second objective is aimed to relate it to the coalition itself and its governance, and by bringing together diverse array of democratic organizations, policymakers, and advocates worldwide to explore these future directions, priorities, and governance structures for the coalition. And our last panel today is dedicated to the future of the CDG, including its governance, as we think that it's really critically important that the coalition's mission, vision, and priorities, while fostering collaborative approach, so that the coalition serves its members in the best possible way. And again, there was an interesting message from the Europe Regional Forum regarding the coalition and working together, when they stated that you have to work with people you disagree with on critical topics, that how disagreement is a permanent feature of the political life. And lastly, the forum took it upon itself to facilitate discussions on regional and global democracy narratives, and hence informing an advocacy campaign led by Global Democracy Coalition, promoting democracy as a global value, as a value that resonates everywhere in the world, even when taking different forms and shapes. And on this last point, at the Asian Forum, it was Celito from the Coalition of Asian Liberal Democrats who really asked the question on whether we are losing the battle of democracy narrative, and how we really need to invest in telling the story in a way that emphasizes the promise and potential and outcomes where they exist of democracy with regional flavor. And I think this same message came strongly from all the regional forums that we organized this week. So what next for the CDG? As you know, this year the Summit for Democracy includes a whole one day for the cohorts. Thank you for that, CDC, indeed. As you know, this year the Summit for Democracy includes a whole one day for the cohorts and the civil society, and the message from civil society is being listened to by the leaders on Summit Day 3. And I think this is truly a breakthrough, and we wish to thank the Korean government, the host, for taking up this recommendation and dedicating a day to youth and civil society voices and incorporating some of those voices, even as recorded messages, as part of the official program. And who knows, maybe in the next summit, the coalition may have a seat around the summit table too. And while engaging with and providing inputs to the summit process remains integral part of the coalition, its existence is no longer tied up with the summit only, but has proven its value as a cross-regional global network of democracy supporting actors. As a network that is able to really synthesize and bring various perspectives as part of the global debate on democracy. And I wish to thank in advance all the panelists, moderators, and speakers. I'm looking very much forward to hearing from you. Thank you all for being here today and participating in this third Global Democracy Coalition Forum. Thank you to my IDEA colleagues, Elisenda and the team, for all the hard work for putting this, this forum, global forum, together. And I wish to thank, in particular, Mr. Jacques Flier, Ambassador of Luxembourg, who has agreed to deliver the closing remarks, Luxembourg being the chair of International IDEA Council of Member States this year. Thank you, Ambassador. And thank you all to all other IDEA member states present here today. And of course, many thanks to Bosch and Ford Foundations for making this event possible. And I wish us all a very productive and democratic Global Forum 2024. Thank you.
Thank you, Lena, so much for an inspiring opening. It paves the way for an incredibly democratic forum. So now we will turn our to first panel, where the panelists will engage in collective reflections, delving into unique opportunities, challenges, achievements on youth, tech, and democracy as they were discussed in each one of the regions. The overarching goal is to identify common threats while also appreciating the distinct nuances that make each region journeys unique. And I am pleased to introduce you to our moderator, Elaine Ford. Elaine promotes digital democracy in Peru and Latin America. She has a Master in International Studies from the University of Chile, a postgraduate in International Law and Human Rights from the University of Nottingham in England, and she's a journalist from the Peruvian University of Applied Sciences. She also has a specialization in innovation in government and collaborative solutions at Harvard Kennedy School. She's currently visiting Policy Fellow 2024 at Oxford Internet Institute at the University of Oxford. She's a director and founder of Democracia Digital, based in Lima, Peru, the former president of the Internet Society, Peru, for 2 consecutive periods, a member of the steering committee of ISOC Chapters Advisory Council in 2019, 2020, 2023, and 2024. She also obtained the decoration of Ambassador of UAE in Peru in 2022, Order of Values Peru Bicentenal decoration in 2021, and the International Leader Entrepreneur Women Award in 2019. Elaine, thank you for being here with us today. And I ask the panelists to please take their seats. Thank you. So here we are.
Good afternoon. I am Elaine Ford, founding director of Democracia Digital, a civil society organization based in Lima, Peru. It is a true honor to participate in this highly relevant session, Youth Technology and Democracy, a Regional Perspective, of the Global Forum, promoted by the Global Democracy Coalition as part of the third Summit for Democracy. The first panel will explore how younger generations engage with technology, innovate, and confront disinformation challenges within their respective regions. The principal goal is to identify common threats and the nuances that make each region journey unique. Three key areas will be addressed which are crucial in today's world, and these are youth, technology, and democracy. These three areas are increasingly intertwined in times when democracy is not facing its best moment globally, and where technology is becoming more and more present in our daily lives and actions. Additionally, we know that it is young people who spend more time connected, many of them being digital natives. According to the recent Democracy Index from The Economist, less than 8% of the global population lives in full democracies, while almost 40% live under authoritarian regimes. Of the 167 countries, included in this index, 34 are under hybrid regimes. Additionally, we know that almost 70% of the global population is connected to the internet, in accordance to official data from the International Telecommunication Union of the UN. This figure is increasing, which allows us the reduction of the digital divide between the connected and disconnected people. It is estimated that globally, young people between 16 and 34 years old spend more than 7 hours connected per day. Imagine the great potential we have if we want to use these online spaces to add value to our democratic systems. So it is the time to use technology as a driver of change, and I believe it is more relevant than ever to view it from this perspective, to prevent emerging technologies and their misuse from weakening the pillars and principles of democracy. We must look together the best ways to reduce risk and face challenges in the digital era in order to protect our democracies. At Democracia Digital, through the work we promote in Latin America and the Caribbean, we know and witness the great benefits that we can achieve through technology, what we also call tech for good. We have identified nearly 1,000 projects of good digital practices, innovative and creative in the region, and around 70% of the total are projects led by young people. When people ask me to define what is digital democracy, I always say it is putting the internet and technology at the service of citizenship and society to strengthen the rights and freedoms of individuals and favor the processes of modernization and innovation in public entities. And all this means generating more transparency, more accountability, more access to public information, more collaborative and participatory societies, more empowered citizens, more modernization of state, more efficiency and public innovation, more education and training opportunities, more possibilities to start business associations, and much more. With greater connectivity, there will be more growth, development, and we can achieve best quality of democracies and citizenship. So now, after these words, I'm delighted to pass the floor to my panelists who will address this great topic according to their experience and the work of their respective organizations. In the program we have, they mentioned 5 great experts, but unfortunately, Enrique de Barrio will not be able to attend today. So we will start now with Dr. James Gomez, who is Regional Director of Asia Center, a civil society research institute with offices in Thailand, Malaysia, and Cambodia. He has over 30 years of working experience in international NGOs, intergovernmental organizations, public and private universities, research institutes, and think tanks. He's a political scientist interested in how emerging technologies impact governance and political participation in societies. Good afternoon, Mr. Gomez, and I have a question for you. Based on Asia Center's experience, how could you describe the current conditions for the development of civic space and youth participation in the region?
Thank you so much. I guess we are all young and hot since we don't have youths on the panel. Okay, there you go. And also not many in the audience. So I'm glad most of us are at least young and hot and very much involved in technology as well. I wanted to kind of respond to Elaine, to your question by just very quickly unpacking some keywords that guides our panel. First, of course, in terms of technology, there's a high consumption of hardware, but also the shift, to state the obvious, right? The move to short videos. So whether it's YouTube Shorts, Instagram and FB Reels, or TikTok, so that's the broad consumption. And also, you know, when we speak about innovation, it tends to be a little bit more sort of a shortcut, raw approach. So a lot of the outputs, you know, disseminated over platforms and technology have a kind of like a natural look. And then in terms of disinformation, we find that youth, you know, are one of the most susceptible groups to disinformation, especially around employment scams and things like that. But I think the one thing for us to keep in mind, and you know, Elaine, very spot on to your question about civic space, and I'll pause after making this remark. What we see from our part of the world, in Southeast Asia and larger Asia, especially in difficult regimes, is the people who run foul of bad laws that restrict civic space, online civic space, is actually now capturing young people. Because young people's use of technology and political communication is very direct, is unfiltered. Because of that, they sometimes innocently or even clumsily run foul of bad laws. So what we see now, the volume of young people being prosecuted by these unjust laws are much higher. If we look at some of the statistics, and you know, we've looked at the hard statistics in Thailand because we are based there, but also generally in other parts of the region, you generally see about 20% of those who are criminalized through these bad laws for their online expression are young people, and increasingly bordering on children being ensnared by this law. So Elaine, back to your question about civic space.
Yes.
Our children who are increasingly more active online are also being snared up by this set of bad laws. And I think our thinking about civic space, if we are looking at technology and youth, must wander into the impact that is also affecting children, if we use the UN definition of legal age. So I'll just pause here as an opening remark.
Okay, thank you. We have another question for you. I must reminder that you have 5 minutes for each question, 2 questions for each one. So now I have another question about misinformation. Online misinformation is one of the main concerns globally. How have different stakeholders in Asia and in your organization dealt with this problem?
I think, again, for those of us who are in the space, I think we more or less know the answer, but just as a form of reminder, I think the first antidote everybody rushed to was fact checking. Our view, our observation, the setting up of fact checking groups were kind of artificially set up as a kind of a CSR approach, a goodwill approach, because of tech companies who felt that their product was doing a lot of damage, so they gave money to some groups and then nurtured the setting up of fact checking groups. So it's kind of an artificial evolution of fact checking groups. Where the fact checking groups are now, with the technology companies also having less money to engage on supporting these groups, is they're kind of dying. They're dying, and they are trying to stay relevant by coming together, looking at group fact checking, or INGOs, trying to think through about innovative project design, looking at kind of forming regional fact checking groups. But I think that's kind of bankrupt already. I think the thinking right now at this point in history and technology is really media literacy. I think, of course, the relevance of media literacy will also change once we find that its usefulness is also limited. But I think the thinking in the region is media literacy. But I think it's important to make a distinction for our work that concerns civic space, whether we are really talking about media literacy as such, or we should also build in elements of civic literacy, political literacy, which I think are very, very, or rights literacy. Because when you do media literacy, if you have boots on the ground, if you run trainings in Thailand or Malaysia, what we see is, again, giving an example on Thailand, if we do media literacy or digital literacy, the minute you speak about navigating the Lèse Majesté law, Section 112, or political parties or the regime, the whole room goes silent, right? Nobody wants to engage on that issue. So that's the limitation. If you go to Malaysia and you talk about media literacy and you talk about the ethnic and religious divide, majoritarian divide, minority religions, and you speak about Islam and minority versions of Islam, then the whole sort of training comes to a halt. So those are emerging limitations of media literacy. But the thinking in the region right now is that's the way to go. For us who work in that space, and I'll just end this input here, we also feel that ethics, information ethics is important, that we should have an ethical approach to content creation and dissemination, because we are always playing catch up. Disinformation is out and we are finding tools to navigate disinformation. I think one of the techniques we can use is to try to limit disinformation before it comes out. So we think ethics might be a good way to go, but I think it's a very, very new way of thinking. So it's not popular like fact-checking in terms of a discourse or media literacy, but I think that's something we can think about. Elaine, back to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Gomez. Yes, you've mentioned misinformation is a huge problem, and to fight against that is a great challenge. And what I feel is that many actors should get involved, many stakeholders, to have a good impact and good results. And I was listening to you about media literacy, and I think also that all about create awareness in different ways to different kind of audiences also is very good and very important for every region in our globe. So thank you very much again, Dr. Gomez, and we will continue with Ms. Meryl Miner. She's Senior Program Manager for Youth and Inclusion of International Republican Institute. She works across the Institute's portfolio of global programs to empower young civic and political leaders with the skills, resources, and network to drive positive change. In her role, Meryl manages Generation Democracy, IRIS flagship youth leadership network, in addition to guiding IRIS approach to inclusive programming. Welcome, Mrs. Miner. So I have a question for you. From Iri's perspective, what are the most effective methods for achieving greater inclusion of youth in democratic and political process?
Thank you so much. Oh, I need a mic. My apologies. Can you hear me? Okay. Can you hear me now? Perfect. Great. So thank you so much for that question. So what we think is it really requires a multifaceted approach to address barriers that youth are facing around the world. And thinking about my experience with Generation Democracy, as mentioned, it's IRI's flagship global youth network. And I also think about the ethos of the S4D, and this event we had here was happened last week. It's really essential to create a space for people to learn from each other on local, regional, and global level. So for those who are unaware, as mentioned, GenDem is something that is a youth network that's 300 plus members from 80 plus countries. And we bring youth together to share their insights, to be empowered by each other, as well as to learn new skills and have access to opportunities like coming to the Summit for Democracy. So I actually just came back from Sri Lanka, or came from Sri Lanka. I didn't come back from Sri Lanka. I live in DC. So I just came from Sri Lanka where we met with our first board, our board of Generation Democracy leaders. So one thing that we do at these board meetings is we map out global and regional challenges that young people face to civic and political participation, which I thought was really relevant when we were thinking about this topic. So one thing we saw here was despite kind of the different variety of people, there were 11 people from 11 countries, from Bosnia to Indonesia to Zimbabwe to Georgia. Despite their context, they face similar issues around the world. And spaces like GenDem, spaces like the S4D or the GDC allow us to hear both the successes and failures for addressing those challenges that young people face and ensure that we really think about ways that we can include youth in the democratic process and really make sure we're not reinventing the wheel. I think we all, as INGO and government folks, we know that sometimes that happens, and it's essential that we don't do that so we can really raise youth voices. Further, especially young activists I've seen from especially closing and closed spaces, having things like a network, having spaces where you're able to come and meet together with young people who are facing similar challenges, who have gone through the same thing as you, really keeps people going and makes you motivated to continue on, where sometimes it can get really hard in this line of work to want to be doing that. So one thing I'll also just note on this is what a best practice we have at IRI is also thinking about soft skill building. This is truly essential when it comes to young people because we can create a seat at the table for young people, but if they don't feel like they have the confidence to actually speak up once they're there, then nothing is going to happen. And then simultaneously, if youth don't know how to share their story in a way that is powerful, that gets the point across, if they're at that table, the people who are there, the elders who have been in the room for a really long time, they're not going to really understand the message. So it's really key that we think about ways we can do that and then place young people in these networks, in these opportunities to ensure that we're able to really create meaningful change. The next thing and the final thing I know is that we really need to start thinking about how young people can make democracy work for young people. Right now, I'm working on some research with Johns Hopkins University, the Zagora Institute, and we've been polling and interviewing young people from the GenDem network as well as from the Democracy Moves network, for those who are familiar with it. And we've really seen that a lot of young people around the world, a big reason that they are not participating in democracy, a reason why they aren't active politically in civic engagement is that they don't see the government as working transparently and fairly in a way that addresses what they actually care about. Our research surveys and interviews shows that young people are worried about their futures. They're worried about climate change, if they're going to have enough money to put food on the table, if they're going to be secure from global pandemics or wars. And they see that the governments are really not delivering results, these democracies that they've been part of. So we need to show young people that they can be not passive observers, but actually be engaged in these institutions and be inspire them to envision a better democracy for themselves. So actively working with young people really involves, again, more than listening to them, putting them at the table, but includes these skill building pieces and meaningfully engaging with young people and investing in them in a way that puts them in a place where they can be heard.
Thank you, Ms. Miner. Yes, sure, and very interesting what you're saying. And I have another question for you. How can civic tech spaces help empower youth, vulnerable, and minority groups? How can we can achieve this?
Yeah, so thinking about tech, I'm not a tech girl. So this is a little bit more from kind of that CSO space, from the DRG space. And even if you're not a tech person these days, you're still, all of us have phones, all of us, I'm using this tablet, which I barely could set up myself. So like I understand that. But really tech can be used as a powerful tool for advocacy and activism around the world. And young people are obviously leveraging that. One thing that I've seen, especially with young people, is using media to tell their stories, particularly digital stories. Before my current position in the Youth and Inclusion Programming at IRI, I used to work on our Laos programs. And yes, Courtney maybe remembers that. And one program that we did that really resonated with this question to me was something called My Laos, My Voice, where we trained young people in rural Laos how to use video digital storytelling to share out advocacy messages and do it in a way that was nuanced, and I call it soft advocacy. So sharing information about climate, sharing information about the importance of reaching across communities, the importance of young people having educational opportunities. And despite being in a closed communist country, they were able to actually do advocacy online. They were able to share this out and get people at least talking and thinking about these important messages, even if it's something that's a little bit different than what we think of as loud protest movements on different websites. Another thing that civic tech is really important for is helping us develop skills. And as mentioned before, soft skills are key. One example that I think about this, kind of going away from soft skills and more in the hard skills, is we see young people around the world aren't able to engage in elections as much as they often want to. IRI, for those who are unfamiliar, elections is really our bread and butter work. So we've been doing it. We've been observing elections all over the world for a very long time. In the conversations I've had with young people, they said, we want to be election observers, but I'm from Africa or I'm from Asia, so I'm never given these opportunities. And therefore, they're not given the opportunity to be able to actually ensure election integrity in their countries in a way. So we created something online, a masterclass that we created that had experts in election observation. They came together and they had modules where young people from any part of the world could learn about how to be an election observer, and then put that into practice, but really in the long term, have that knowledge and skills that they wouldn't be able to have otherwise. And that wouldn't be possible without technology. And that's really a kind of a key thing I see from my perspective in the global region, on the global part of IRI, is that technology allows us to share out these skills, share out information that helps promote democracy in a way that we never would be able to otherwise. Civic tech in that same way also is really important for promoting transparency and accountability. I was speaking this past week when I was in Colombo to a young woman from Argentina, and she's doing work on this, for example, where she's developing a platform that scrapes data for government procurement websites and then does fact checking on those and creates red flags when they're something that is considered not transparent or something where there's money going the wrong way. So this sort of use of technology to me and young people leveraging AI, leveraging coding, even though it's something that, like I said, definitely far from I don't know how to do it, but it's super great that young people are actually doing this kind of work, because this is going to be able to make transparency, accountability easier and hopefully therefore more relevant around the world. And finally, I would just note that civic tech is also really important for using as a civic education platform. One thing I saw, again, with that research that I was previously discussing was that civic education is oftentimes a reason why young people are turning away from democracy. They don't know, not only do they not know how to get involved with democracy, but what the purpose of it is, why their voices matter. So using digital technology to be able to share out civic education messages in a way that's context relevant to the different locations you're in, whether that be on Facebook, WhatsApp, Kakao Talk, or on even radio signals or SMS, sharing out those messages of civic education is going to be essential to be able to really create and foster the next generation of young leaders around the world. Thank you so much.
Oh, that's great, Ms. Mania. Thank you so much. And it's also so important to work and to create all these civic tech spaces in local languages, to involve and to include minority groups in our countries. Thank you so much, very interesting. And now we go ahead with Ms. Mary Ododah. She's the Executive Board member of the Youth Café. She is a development strategist and peace builder, is dedicated to elevating sub-Saharan Africa's quality of life, particularly for marginalized youth. In her role as board advisory director of Youth Café, she actively combats social injustice, champions youth leadership, and advocates for gender equality and human rights. Mrs. Ododah, I have two questions for you. So the first one is, from your experience, we would like to hear some lessons from youth-led initiatives where technology is the driver of social change.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. So basically, maybe let me just start by painting a picture. I am a very passionate African, so I'm going to speak from a sub-Saharan perspective. Tech, there's a saying that we usually have in our space in the sense of Africa has been the slowest in terms of getting tech, but we're the fastest in terms of uptake and how to use it. So at the moment, the last statistics that we got from ITU in 2022 said that Africa has a penetration of technology of about 40%, which is an increase, and it has been increasing. Some of the countries that are the biggest users of tech include Kenya, Mauritius, Morocco, Egypt, Nigeria, just to say a few. And we have been using tech on our continent in terms of enhancing policies such as health, education, agriculture, security, just to say a few of them. So for instance, just to give an example, in Kenya, we have been implementing a video surveillance software in a lot of the parts of the country, which has been assisting us in terms of the police. So basically just how different agencies can work together in order for us to make sure that the country is safe, and also just the coordination of the region that we're in, because as you know, the Horn of Africa is one of the most conflict-affected spaces on the continent. And in terms of tech, in terms of democracy, tech has really been one of the key influences, and it plays a very, very big role, and youth have been at the forefront of this. Maybe just to take you back, 2020, there was a hashtag that was trending in Nigeria called EndSARS. And maybe 20, 30 years ago, this is something that would not have taken place. But with the level of tech that we have, this organization was actually disbanded. And then in our elections in 2017, and also the Nigerian elections in 2015, there was the Cambridge Analytica scandal, which I'm sure we're all familiar with. And just the mere fact that we were able to showcase this and we were able to speak out on it, this brought light as to where some of the gaps are and where some of the problems were. Also another thing, so this is unfortunately the dark side of tech and young people. We've been affected by deepfakes. This has been reported quite a bit in South Africa, in Botswana, and Mauritius. And one thing that I really love about the age that we're in is the fact that we now have access and we have spaces whereby we're able to report this. We're able to actually fact check. I can hear quite a bit of that being spoken about. And we have an NGO in South Africa, a non-partisan NGO called Africa Check, which basically does what we have been discussing, but now on the continent. The NGO is spreading. We have an office in Kenya, in Senegal, South Africa, and Nigeria. And all of this are youth-led initiatives in the sense of we are now being given the space, and also we're inserting ourselves in spaces whereby we are able to share what does democracy mean for us? Where are the gaps? What can we do? And tech has been one of the ways that we are now infiltrating these spaces. So in terms of my experience, we still have a very long way to go, but I do feel as though even just sitting on a platform like this, I am an African speaking here, so this is really good in the sense of we can also get to share where we are, how we can collaborate, how we can work, and ideally where we need to go.
Thank you, Ms. Ododah. I have another question for you. And according to the work done by Youth Cafe, have you been able to identify what are the main challenges that young people face in driving technology initiatives? Perhaps aspects such as connectivity or education in STEAM areas, especially women. We would like to know. Go ahead, please.
Okay, now speaking on the Youth Cafe, this is one of the largest youth-led organizations on the continent. We have a footprint of over 40 countries, and globally we also work with a number of partners. When it comes to democracy, especially women, we have a number of challenges coming from systemic inequalities. So if I can just highlight a few, starting with civic education. There's insufficient education when it comes to this in terms of just us being taught in schools and in communities unless you go look out for the information. Also in terms of just the documentation bit. Due to our cultural and societal norms, sometimes it's a bit hard for a woman to be sitting in a space such as this. I have been in countries on the continent whereby as I'm conducting my research or I'm carrying out a project, as a woman, I cannot sit in a room with men. So at times, just our voices being snuffled out of the conversation, it creates apathy in a sense of, I am not allowed to speak, so I can't share what the problems are. Hence, coming up with skewed policies, coming up with gaps in terms of what the research is all about. And until we use a gender lens for us to understand what some of the problems are, women face a huge challenge. Also, just in terms of representation, let me give an example with Kenya. In 2010, we got a new constitution. And in the constitution, it said that we need to have a 2/3 gender role. So there are countries on the continent that have been able to do this, such as Rwanda. Kenya, we are sitting at about 23%, so we are about 7% short of what the threshold requires that the constitution needs to have. And what the Youth Cafe has done in lieu of this is that we have created digital platforms. We have access to over 1 million youth on the continent. And on this platform, we are able to share materials in a language that is inclusive. We are able to break down what democracy means, what your rights are, and ideally champion initiatives that youth have started in your own context. And this, we have seen an uptake of this, whereby we have more women actually campaigning for seats. We have more young girls charting out this path in a way that they are more aware of what their rights are. And they're spreading what they're doing, which has really been a big change and a really big shift. The other thing is, Youth Cafe also has a platform whereby we teach young people how public finances work. So it's a space where you get to see, so we have 47 counties in the country, and every county, young people get to see how much did we get, what needs to go where. So ideally, you raise your voice in terms of what services matter to me as a young person, where can you raise our voices collectively in channeling this? And as a result of that, just in the past year, we've engaged over 70,000 young people, and over 100 million shillings have been redirected to services that actually work in the counties.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ododah. Very interesting what Youth Cafes is doing in the region. And it's also important to say that one of the main problems that Africa has, and maybe in Latin American countries happens the same, is this huge gap of connectivity between the rural areas and the urban areas, no? And that's a great challenge that we must work through also, for youth people can be connected and can be empowered as well. Thank you so much again. And now we go with Mr. Anselmo Lee. He's Regional Coordinator of Asia Civil Society Partnership for Sustainable Development. Mr. Lee is one of the Asia's most prominent and experienced human rights advocates, with decades of experience and contributions to human rights and civil society movements in Asia. Mr. Lee, I have two questions for you as well. And the first one is this one. Considering that many of the countries in Asia face flawed democracy nowadays, according to the Economist recent index 2023, what are the keys to greater youth engagement and activism in democratic governance processes?
I need to apologize because it's like I'm the student's oral examination by professor. my email was hacked last 1 week, so I couldn't receive your questions in advance, but let me try to answer your question. And also, if you don't mind, I can reformulate your questions.
Of course.
I'm here also as a local indigenous citizen of South Korea. I came here to welcome you and congratulate and also say hello to my old friend like Riley and Lena, many others, as also a member of GDC. As you know, this is very historical. I just want to remind you of the history of democracy conference in South Korea. These are third global democracy meeting. The first one was year 2000. There was a COD, Community of Democracy Summit, year 2000. I was there as a youth. And then 15 years later, 2015, there was a WMD, the World Movement for Democracy. I was a local organizing committee. But these are third one, The Summit for Democracy. I'm a member of GDC. So I'm happy to see the evolution of so-called democratic coalition building at the same time having meeting here in South Korea. But as you know, timing is very good here in Korea because we have an election next month. And this is the first election in South Korean history with the AI, ChatGPT, So already there are some problem here and there. And young people are very excited over this election because it's a parliamentary, not presidential, parliamentary election. And so I want to, your question was the youth, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and can I ask also a second question so that I can answer both?
Yes.
I'm very nervous about second question.
Sure, Mr. Anselmo. What are the keys to greater youth engagement and activism in democratic governance processes?
Wow, this is the second question.
Oh, no, that's the first one. Yes, part
I
of
have
the
a second
first one.
question too?
And the second question is in your organizational experience, what youth-led civic tech actions have been sustainable and have achieved a positive and lasting impact in the region?
Okay, yeah. Okay, regarding the tech, I'm not expert on technology. James Gomez, he's an expert, so I hope you can help. And also, James Gomez Asia Center is a member of the APSD, so we have been working together. I just want to focus more on general youth, because generally, as you know, I don't know whether Milk Tea Alliance, have you heard of Milk Tea Alliance? It's not coffee, Milk tea is popular in East Asia, Hong Kong, China, Taiwan, Thailand, So all these countries, they are facing a lot of so-called repression, So as a youth, they took an initiative to build international solidarity. I think this is a very good initiative, the youth-led initiative against, the repression, And of course, in Korea also, some Korean youth, they are part of this one. It's really, but very interestingly, it was not led by the existing established NGO, very spontaneous, Of course, organized like ADN, Asia Democracy the Network, which I was a founding member in 2013, we are supporting, facilitating, But unfortunately, this type of very spontaneous, this group, of course, as you said, they are very good at using the technology, SNS and many things, although there are some limitation in some countries like Hong Kong and China. But they are facing the question of sustainability, The first few years were very active, But they face a big challenge like Hong Kong and Thailand, so they got very frustrated, and then they were not able to really continue with a very strong network and campaign. That's why I think it's important for existing organizations like Asia Center, APSD, ADL. We need to work with the youth, respecting their autonomy, their initiative. So that is one of the common challenges. How can we work together? And another one is there are many international opportunities for youth engagement. I just want to remind you, maybe outcome of this meeting, this conference, we can use the same outcome, not only the Summit for Democracy, but also the UN. As you may know, this year we have a Summit of the Future. As the name stands out, the Summit for the Future is very much youth focused. So there's 11 policy brief, 2 of them directly about youth. One is meaningful youth engagement, and another one is declaration for youth, a future generation. And also there are 2 policy briefs about digital. The one is Global Digital Compact, the other one is information integrity. So the topic we are discussing in this session is a really core agenda of UN Summit of the Future. So and also many young people, they are very much engaged in the Summit of the Future. Summit of the Future. So I want to see how we can help youth to engage both. Summit for Democracy at the same time, Summit for the Future, because many youth, they are facing a lot of restrictions within the country. And then, but relatively, we have a more space, political freedom and civic space at the level UN. So I think we can use the UN to bring the voice from UN to the national. That is also another approach we can develop with the youth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anselmo. I made emphasis on the word sustainable because what we know from the experience is that many initiatives using technology, for they to have a really good impact, they must be sustainable in time. They must last long, because otherwise, what we see from our experience in Democracia Digital is that mostly new technologies are developed, new initiatives, new projects, but if they do not last, they stay without any kind of result, any kind of impact, and there has been invest too many efforts and human resources working on that kind of initiatives. So that usually happens. And that was my question about, Mr. Anselmo Lee, because you work in an organization about sustainable impact from civil society partnership. So if you have any experience known in your region that could be important to mention here, this is the best occasion to say so.
I think I already mentioned about the case, the Milk Tea Alliance. That can be the one concrete case. And then the other one is, there are 2 types of youth group. They are the members of existing democracy organization. As a young leader and the member is the existing one. At the same time, they have a youth own. They have their, like a youth cafe. They have their own initiative. But I think these 2, as I said, has to go together because the YMCA. We have a YMCA. A lot very active in South Korea, and then half of them are not youth. I asked, you are YMCA. Where is the youth? They say, oh, half for youth. I mean, we are working for youth. And also, it's a kind of intergeneration dialogue, I think that is very important in terms of sharing of wisdom and knowledge. And also in Korea, I'm sure the ambassador, you may know about the new trends. We have called 60-plus initiative, 60-plus means pensioners, And in terms of the intergenerational justice, my generation or the senior generation, they felt very guilty, because we use all the natural resources. So this is not the justice for new generation. So instead of telling youth what to do, they said, we are working for you, So they do all kinds of work for youth so that you can take a more important role to play, So that kind of intergenerational support, dialogue, cooperation, I think is very important. So that youth is not only, because as I said, the youth alone, because they are busy with their own family and also livelihood and a new job and so on and so on. So I think we need to have a more, that kind of the long-term sustainability mechanism to make sure the youth can play the key role. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anselmo Lee. Dr. James Gomez, want to share some
Yeah, I just
ideas?
wanted to kind of build on your question on sustainability and what Anselmo said. From our experience, we host a lot of fellowships or fellows for youth, where it can be leadership, media fellows, tech fellows, democracy fellows for youth. And these are the observations that we have had. One, I think the engagement by youths are by nature, they are sporadic engagement, short burst, and then it's gone. We also, have a challenge of selecting youths to participate in the program, because when the calls goes out, because we want to provide opportunity for underserved parts of the communities and their youth, but often we have the privileged ones that are first off the bat to apply for these things. So that's also a challenge. So recruitment and ensuring that those from underserved communities are prioritized. So that's another thing. But in short, what we found was, because of the sporadic nature of youth engagement, and that's the nature of the engagement, we need to provide a kind of a loose, long-term structure on which to hang this different sporadic engagement as and when, and then also provide mentorship and coaching. Yeah, so that's our kind of experience over many years when we have run different types of fellowship programs for youth, that it's necessary. The nature of the sporadic engagement also comes with the consumption of technology and a short attention span and all of that. So we feel through our, many learnings of different fellowships, that providing a kind of a long-term loose structure and coaching and mentoring built into it can, harness or harvest a lot of this engagement process.
Thank you so much. And Ms. Muriel Minor will like to say words.
I'll be super quick on this, but it reminded me of some things that I wanted to note. So one thing with sustainability is that's the thing we all think about all the time, right? So I'll kind of hark back to, I think, one of the greatest lessons that I've seen with sustainability. There's three of them. One is making sure we train people on skills of actually how to continue to get funding, how to get volunteers. I thought about this because Katie LaRoque, who you'll be hearing from later, actually came many years ago to Laos to train people on capture and business development and for CSOs. And it actually is something that we've continued to use her training for. So yeah, in case you didn't know, it's been one of kind of, people learned actually how to go out and get funding, go out and make connections. Those are what's key. We can't just continue to give people grants and then hope it's going to continue. The next thing is just partnerships. I think that we need to continue to facilitate spaces for that. And I think about actually one partner that Gendem's trying to put right now is World Liberty Congress's Youth Liberty Alliance. Those kind of partnerships are key because you can create sustainable links that make it so even after funding is gone, even after somebody who's overseeing a program on TechDem is out of the room, that you have those kind of sustainable bonds that are creating real change. And finally, just making sure to keep youth motivated. I think that that's the most important thing about young people when it comes to sustainability. Young people are excited to work oftentimes as volunteers, oftentimes for working long hours for little to no money because they care. So thinking about ways that you can continue to keep youth motivated, whether that is through something like Generation Democracy, where people feel like they have this group of peers that care about the same thing they do, or through something completely different. It's just something I would say is really key to think about the sustainability of all initiatives we talk about today.
Very important, very interesting. Thank you, Ms. Minor. And yes, I want to say as well, as I mentioned before, in Latin America, from Democracia Digital, we have 2 awards. One is the National Award on Digital Democracy, and the other one is Latin American Award on Digital Democracy. And we promote good digital practices, good initiative mostly from youth, but from all over, the audiences who want who are promoting any kind of initiative, tech initiative. And all these good practices, they are together in our 2 observatories for you to know, because this serves as a window for the whole world, see what we are doing in our countries, how we are using technology for good purposes for our democracy. And you can check them. We have almost 1,000 good practices all over Peru and Latin American countries, Hispanic countries. And they are good, excellent work, excellent initiative that can be also replicated and well used to share ideas and to make more partnerships, as Ms. Minor said, and grow with other kind of actors. So I think we finished with this great panel. Thank you so much for your interventions. But we will have some time for questions. Please, if you would like to make a question, I will appreciate if you raise your hand. So Elisenda, you're first, please.
Thank you. Thank you for an amazing panel. It was really inspiring, and we got to learn so much. I have a question for Mary and Meryl. You were talking about youth initiatives that you promote either through the Youth Cafe or through this Generation Democracy, and how you implement them in different countries. Have you ever encountered a specific initiative that works in one country and doesn't work in another? And what was the challenge? Or is there something very specific that actually has worked in all the countries that have been implemented? And I will keep the mic so I can go around the room.
I can project. My voice is a little bit shaky from being there for the last, being at a workshop for a week. Okay. I'm happy to project and be as loud as I can. So I think that what I would just say is there are things that the general framework of programming works across the world. And that is, to me, young people they don't want to go to something where they are just hearing from, old people or experts about what is going on and what's working and not working. They want to be able to provide their own voice, hear from their peers, really have a participatory experience. So I think that as long as you kind of have that in mind, making sure you elevate youth voices, create that participation, you'll have a good activity. And what doesn't work, I think what is key, and something we try to emphasize within a global program like GenDem, is that young people need to understand the context of their own communities, and they're the experts in that, right? So my brain can only hold so much, unfortunately. So I really do defer to the people who we work with to go out and say, like, this is actually what's gonna work in this country versus what will work in another. And I think actually about last year after the Summit for Democracy, our Generation Democracy delegation got together and discussed how they wanted to share out the information they learned. And they decided to do that through country consultations. So we held 4 around the world in Bosnia, Mexico, the Philippines, and Tunisia. So all of them had the same underlying idea. They're participatory workshops to get information about how young people want to be seen in the global democracy conversation, as well as to share out work that they learned at the S4D2. And each one, though, was distinctly different based on the different communities they were in. Whether that be, for example, in Tunisia, they used a format about basically fishbowl debates. That was a way that they kind of see young people being the most comfortable and engaging in that conversation. Or it being a more formalized event, something like in Bosnia, where they brought together experts from, we could ensure that who could talk about this space, or in Mexico, where they literally went to a cafe and talked together for a day, coming up with ideas, because that was, what young people felt most comfortable with in that context. So hopefully that answers your question, but if not, I'm happy to elaborate more.
Thank you. There was another question. Yes, please. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Ms. Ododah.
All right. So in terms of the challenges and what has worked and what has not worked, in our space, so Africa is broken up into different regions, and just based off the cultures that we have and how we speak and how democracy and our politics is carried out, that plays a really, really big role. So one thing, especially with young people, is if you want them to participate, co-create with them. If you leave them out of the conversation and come up with a document and tell them, this is what we have, come join us, young people will not. There'll be a few who'll probably join you, but majority will not, because you have not consulted them. You don't know what the root causes are of what some of the problems are. And young people, from some of the research that we've conducted, young people feel as though they're there as a token. So instead of being heard, they feel as though their job is just to be seen to tick off a box, just to say we engaged 1,000 young people from this place, and this is what the general overview is. But if we're able to break it down in a sense of, can we actually have a conversation and get to know what is going on? That's one of the ways that we've actually seen young people will come up with solutions to the actual problems that are there. The other thing is, a lot of the African countries still practice traditional politics. Most of our presidents are over the age of 50. And that conversation, because they come from a different generation than we do. So how we tend to perceive what the issues are, how we tend to perceive what the problems are, might not necessarily be the same way a 60-year-old or a 70-year-old might. And having that intergenerational dialogue has also bridged the gap in a lot of the spaces where we can get to sit with the leaders that are there and they get to listen to us. A lot of African countries are now having African youth charters. I know Kenya has one. And this has been a space that has enabled us to understand what politics is and understand what our role is. And just getting back to tech has also played a very, very big role. I know in Kenya we can literally start a hashtag any trends based off of what a politician said, and that will get traction, that will get attention to a point that if there has been an issue, that politician will actually come up and apologize or rectify what or whatever it is that has been said. So I think just to get back to your question, what works is when you co-create, and what does not work is when we keep following traditional political ways of how to engage young people in democracy.
Thank you, Ms. Ododah. So now we have a second question.
It's
Please,
more
go
of a
ahead.
suggestion than question, but
Okay.
I would like us to consider role of schools, high schools, and higher education, universities in particular, because you go to school, youth are there, right? And these schools are relatively well equipped with internet connections compared to other places. And this is a place where you provide the education and the right place to provide civic education. So we can take school as a unit of analysis when we focus on this particular issue. I can give you a few examples of mine. I'm professor at Seoul National University. I created several civic engagement courses. So we make teams and they design their own research projects. I can give you 3 examples. One team works on organ donors. They create YouTube narratives, YouTube stories for organ donors, and it helps a lot. They collected their colleagues, and it's an inter-university project now. They work with a NGO, and it's a very creative way to help organ donors. All you need is a your phone, handphone, or a camcorder. That's it. The second one is about garbage map, online garbage map. These days they are very good at, learning civic tax, right? They create these applications, and they, use different colors to show different areas where you have different levels of seriousness in terms of your garbage disposal and so on. And they created this application and they demonstrated it in front of citizens and politicians. And now it's officially subsidized by the district government. That's a second example. The third one is Mini Republic. Now, my students, they created a Mini Republic. So basically a meeting of university students with people around the university. And the theme is handicapped people's right to move, right? And they, had this really nice mini public, and they used civic tech very extensively, of course. And it was very successful. I try to be short. But now they're working on going metaverse about this civic tech mini public. So again, universities, schools, they are really nice platforms, right? Where we can mix youth, technology, and democracy. That's my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to know if there's another question here in the room. Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Just very quickly, I was very happy to hear a little bit about media literacy from some of the panelists. And I guess this question goes to whoever wants to take it. I feel like media literacy is going to be, or is a very big gap that we have right now in our countries. So just like to ask you really quickly, what is the role of civil society in designing media literacy curriculums, courses? What is the role of governments? And I guess the second question, if you can answer this, is have you observed any instances of successful collaboration between governments and civil society in coming up with media literacy? But I guess that's more difficult to off the top of your heads. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So please, who would like to answer? Mr. Anselmo Lee? No? Oh, Dr. James Gomez? Okay, go ahead.
I just want to couple the suggestion and the point about media literacy, and I speak largely more about the Asia Pacific. Our institutions of education are authoritarian structures controlled for the dissemination and promotion of propaganda by the ruling elite. So they won't let you in because they want to control the minds, right? So I think there are differences based on jurisdictions, and we have to investigate that. But broadly, one can say that is whether it's public or private institutions, higher or junior level schools. So I think that's the first kind of shot. Yeah. So in terms of media literacy and co-creation with civil society, then it becomes a challenge because it's one of resources, right? Whether civil society are in the flow. I'll give you a hard example. Google gave the ASEAN Foundation, I believe it was 1.5 million US dollars to roll out media literacy in the 10 ASEAN countries. In Southeast Asia, Asia Center was invited to roll out in Thailand and Malaysia as a partner. Because it was farmed out to ASEAN Foundation, they had trouble engaging with more sort of progressive groups to roll out the media literacy program. So even that piece of resource, right, had to filter down to the ASEAN Foundation, which, of course, took quite a bit of the chunk for admin coordination and all that. And then you get the bare bones amount coming down to you, the implementer, and then they squeeze you, right, for implementation and so on and so forth. So I think that's the reality. I think if we can have enough resources, I think civil society should be an arm in doing media literacy, because it also depends on what type of media literacy. So, and that's the weakness of the media literacy. Is the question is who pays for it? Who pays for it? Then you teach the audience what you have to be literate about. So I just wanted to. I mean, it's not comprehensive, but just kind of off the bat remark. Yeah.
Thank you. Please, Ms. Ododah.
Okay, I think I can respond to both your questions. So the first one, I will relate it to the Youth Cafe. So we are coming up with an AI structure whereby we are designing, can I call them documents? But ideally how we can predict how young people vote, how young people, what their views are, and what their thinking process are in terms of democracy and how we can break that down. So we have contextualized it that, and we debated this last week at the People's Dialogue Forum, which was an initiative led by the government and other CSOs that came together to actually have a discussion around this. And finances was actually a big part of it in terms of who carries on with this. So it's still relatively new, but it's an ongoing conversation. To respond to the second question, I think it was on governments and ideally how they have worked together, if that was, yes. So I also do quite a bit of work with COMESA, which is a regional economic community, and we cover 21 countries on the continent. And under COMESA, so initially it started off as a trading bloc, but over time, it's very hard to trade in conflict spaces. So there's a department called Governance, Peace and Security, which I work with. And what we do is we've started coming up with one-stop youth centers. We launched one in Uganda in December. And this is a digital space in marginalized areas that are post-conflict. These are spaces whereby we have set up computers and a library, and we are training people in IT to be able to work with very marginalized young people who generally don't get the opportunity to do that. So in terms of that, COMESA is coordinating 21 countries to do that. And over time, we are rolling out in phases. So we've started out in the Horn of Africa, we'll go to the southern bit, the island states, and the northern bit. So there is work also being done in that space.
Please, Mr. Anselmo-Lee.
Yep. I guess this is our last chance, right, to speak before
We
you.
have only 5 minutes left, yes?
That's why I want to respond to some of the questions at the same time.
Excuse me, maybe there's a question, one more question from the room? In that case, that would be
Okay,
the last intervention.
I just to share my thought about the content of the media literacy, because technology is a tool, but we need to think about the content, what is inside, The number one, about thinking about, we are using the democracy and human rights a lot, civic space. But I don't know other countries, but as far as Korea is concerned, this word democracy, human rights, very much politicized, by some political parties. And also there is a fatigue, because sometimes we take for granted, So it's very difficult to mobilize young people, unless they become the victim, So, and then there are another framework agenda, which is SDG, Sustainable Development Goal, which covers climate and many others, a lot, I can see thousands of young people in the university too, climate and SDG, not so much democracy. So very difficult to mobilize, That's why one way to approach them was using SDG framework to attract them, so-called SDG 16, SDG 16, because there's a civic space, corruption issues, and so on and so on. So my suggestion is, of course, we can continue to use the human rights democracy, which is a universal norm, very useful. But when it comes to certain context, I think we need to have a different approaches, But eventually, human rights, SDG, democracy, we have a common, more civic and so on. That's number one. Number two, is within the SDG framework, there is a target 4.7, global citizen education, really has been working a lot, Bridge 47. But I think the international dimension, international democracy or global is very, very important, even more important than before, because now we see a lot of young people are killed in Ukraine and Russia. They're all young people. And Palestine and Israel, So they may be a good citizen in their own community and country, but they are killing each other, That's why I think we need to really highlight, pay attention to the international dimension, So it can be the education for international understanding, global citizens, so that we can have both, especially in the time of great division and conflict and mistrust, the international dimension of this citizen. Lastly, young people need more concrete model rather than theory, So I don't know whether idea can bring the young political leaders or parliamentarians, like we have a political leader in New Zealand, Chile, and Finland, They need to see the young concrete case, and also parliamentarians, so that young people can be motivated, as they can become the policy makers and decision makers in the real politics. Thank you. Yep.
Thank you so much, Ms. Anselmo-Lee. Maybe Ms. Miner would like to say some last words?
Yeah, so I'll just touch back on the schools piece and I'll be super quick. So one thing on the schools that we saw is really important is it's a really essential place for civic education to begin at a young age. So one thing that we did a few years ago with Generation Democracy, one of our participants in Mexico, she created a participatory budgeting exercise within her school for kids in middle school, basically telling them, like, here's a pot of money, you should budget it to be able to determine what you want this programs in your school to look like and go pitch it to your school leadership. The point here is that what really works is getting young people to see democracy as an integral part of their life, not just something that is happening that they're like, oh, it's kind of gross, politicians are like annoying. You want them to see this as something that's really key and fun and something that they get. So that's something I think is important to remember around working in schools. And with media literacy, I'll just end with saying that we're seeing more and more that authoritarian actors are using media as a crucial tool for sharing out their message with young people in particular. And that's becoming more and more prevalent. And as that becomes more prevalent, we're seeing young people turn away from democracy, turn towards authoritarianism. So it's really essential that as people who believe in democracy in this room, that we continue to think about ways that we can help young people understand when they see things on the internet or they see things that they're reading on social media, what's real, what's not, what's different kind of tools and techniques that authoritarian actors might be using, because that's going to be essential for us moving forward as democracy supporters to continue to bolster that within future generations.
Thank you so much, and thank you to this great panel. In this session, we've talked about civic space, civic tech, youth participation and engagement, misinformation and disinformation, media literacy, fact-checking, challenges, gaps and connectivity, inclusion, education, sustainability. So many important areas that are so interesting for our democracies, and we've shared different experiences, different approaches, and we've noticed that's too much to learn between us to strengthen our democracies. So thank you very much to you all to be here, and let's continue with this important global forum and for this third Summit for Democracy. Thank you.